Welcome to CRJ 303 Corrections. I am Lynn Dory and I will be your instructor for the next 5 weeks. During the course, if you have any questions, please let me know. This week we will assess the 6 primary purposes of correctional aims behind sentencing. We will discuss the historical changes in corrections and its philosophies in the United States. In Chapter 1, we will discuss correctional aims and correctional systems. Corrections is defined as the social control of offenders through a system of imprisonment, rehabilitation, probation, and parole. There are 6 primary correctional aims: retribution, deterrence, incapacitation, rehabilitation, reintegration, and restoration. There have been 3 primary strategies used in corrections in the United States. They are incarceration, community-based corrections, and death. Incarceration involves the use of a correctional facility that is a jail or a prison to house criminal offenders. Jails generally house individuals serving misdemeanor sentences under 1 year and individuals awaiting trial. Prisons generally house individuals serving felony sentences over 1 year. And in some states, the misdemeanor/felony distinction is based on location of placement. According to our textbook, incarceration has been linked to the aim of rehabilitation. However, of all the correctional aims, incarceration in of itself is least likely to result in the rehabilitation of offenders. The best evidence available suggests that even if rehabilitation programming is correct, among incarcerated populations, the impact on reoffending rates is a modest 8 to 10%. Community supervision for federal offenders, probation and parole, is provided by the agents of the U.S. Probation Service. Since I currently live in Florida, I will be discussing the Department of Corrections as it relates to my state. However, you can find information regarding your Department of Corrections by clicking on the link in the transcripts provided. According to the Florida Department of Corrections, employees are broken down into the following categories. 81% are certified employees, probation, parole offices. Healthcare makes up about 0.6%. Less than 3% of staff provide management and administrative support. The average employee is 41 years old and has been with the agency for 9 years. The Federal Bureau of Prisons was created in 1930 to provide for the administration and operation of federal correctional facilities. As of February 23, 2017, there are roughly 189,000 inmates under the authority of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. That breaks down to roughly 153,000 federal inmates in custody, roughly 22,000 federal inmates in privately managed facilities, and roughly 13,000 federal inmates in other types of facilities. Looking at this chart, the highest number of offenders is between 36 and 40 years old. Does this surprise you? For the Department of Corrections in Florida, this is the current breakdown of inmates. 66% are non-Hispanic, 59% are white, and 93% are male. Does any of these statistics surprise you? The majority of the inmates in prison on June 30, 2016 are male, which is 93%, with the females accounting for 6.9% of the population. The top 5 categories for primary offenses for which inmates are incarcerated are burglary, murder-manslaughter, drug offenses, robbery, sexual and lewd behavior. As you can see from the past 5 years, the inmate population has decreased. In 2012, we had over 100,000 inmates incarcerated. In 2016, we had a little over 99,000 inmates incarcerated. Why do you think this has decreased in the past 5 years? As you can see from the chart, from 2007 to 2016, the Florida population of inmates has decreased by 10.9 per 100,000. From 2015 to 2016, roughly 31,000 offenders were released from Florida's prison, a 2.2 decrease from 2014 to 2015. Most of the permanent releases, 62%, were released because their sentences expired, and approximately 15% were released to probation or community control. 16.8% were released to conditional release supervision, a type of supervision for more serious offenders. The majority of the offenders released in 2015-2016 were white, 52%, were male, 88%, 35% between the ages of 25 to 34, and 34% between the ages of 35 and 49. There are approximately 31% serving time for violent offenses, and 32% were serving time for property crimes. Below are just a few facts from the Florida Department of Corrections. The majority of the state-run prisons are not air-conditioned. However, all contracted prisons are air-conditioned. Most prison inmates live in dormitories, not cells. Florida State Prison in Stark is the only Florida prison where all inmates live in single cells. Most Florida inmates must serve a minimum of 85% of their sentence before release. Prison inmates work in jobs ranging from laundry to cooking to prison maintenance to prison industries and outside work squads. Community work squads inmates perform services under agreements with the Department of Transportation and other agencies such as the Division of Forestry, counties, cities, and nonprofit organizations. As mandated by law, all inmates have access to libraries, religious services, medical, and dental care. Inmates using Florida prison general libraries during the fiscal year 2013 to 2014 borrowed over 1.2 million books. Law library services were provided to inmates 550,000 times throughout the state. So what does it cost to house an inmate in a Florida prison? It costs an average of $48.28 a day, or roughly $17,622 per year to house an inmate in a Florida prison. When I was in college, I did an internship at a community-based correctional system. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had. The facility I worked in was inmates who had less than 6 months left on their sentence. They slept at the facility, but then worked during the day. We had a van that would take the inmates to work and then pick them back up again. The inmates at this facility were basically drug users instead of violent criminals. According to Crime Solutions, community corrections are sanctions imposed on convicted adults or adjudicated individuals that occur in a residential or community setting outside of a jail or prison. The sanctions are enforced by agencies or courts with legal authority over the adult or juvenile offenders. Community corrections programs are generally operated by probation services and parole agencies. Community supervision is the use of various alternatives like probation, parole, mandatory release within a community to monitor and manage criminal offenders. Probation is a disposition in which the offender is managed and supervised in the community both under general and specific conditions. Parole is an administrative decision by a Department of Corrections to release an offender from an institutional setting prior to the completion of a sentence and supervised under general and specific conditions in the community. Many argue that the death penalty has a direct link to deterrence. However, is this true, especially when it takes 10 to 15 years for the death penalty to be carried out? As of November 2016, the states in red have the death penalty in place, the states in blue do not have the death penalty, and the states in purple have a governor-imposed ban. Correctional aims is defined as the varied purposes that correction is trying to achieve, can be understood as made of many competing and oftentimes contradictory objectives. Retribution is about holding offenders accountable through punishment. Deterrence is designed to send a message to the offender that society and criminal offending is not acceptable. Restoration is that offenders take responsibility for their actions and atone to victims as well as the larger community. Before coming into this class, what did you know about the correctional system? Was your view based on firsthand experience, what you saw on TV, or what you read about? In Chapter 2, we will be discussing the historical relationships among punishment, incarceration, and corrections. Looking at the punishment colonists, they tended to view crime as a sinful act and not a social problem. Is this still believed today? American prisons faced issues of overcrowding, time management, conflicting external influence over prisoners, and physical plant concerns. Are we still plagued with these same problems? And if so, why have we not been able to resolve these issues? In the 1820s, two prison models came to the forefront in the United States, the Pennsylvania and the Auburn model. Jesiria Beccaria argued that capital punishment was neither useful as a deterrent, nor is it necessary or ethically appropriate for the state to take a life of any of its citizens. His view of the government was that it should work to prevent crime rather than focus on punishment, and that effort spent on education and rewarding good behavior would reap better results and bring about greater happiness for all. Jeremy Benham argued that the goals of punishment are to prevent recidivism and to deter others from committing crime. Punishment in colonial America was often severe and humiliating. In the back of the colonial era, punishment included whippings, confinement. Do you think if we had these types of punishment today, people would think twice about committing a crime? Other types of punishment include banishment and capital offenses. Punishment in the 19th century, the new goal was to eliminate the cruelty of corporal punishment. By the end of the first quarter of the 20th century, every state in the Union had built a penitentiary or had begun construction on one. The penitentiary seemed to be a logical solution to this redefined social problem. Now the root of deviance was not in the individual, nor was it in the legal system. The Pennsylvania system was founded on Quaker beliefs that encouraged solitary reflection and solitary cells. Punishment or confinement in this system was meant to instill penitence and repentance in the hearts of those sentenced. The Auburn and reformatory models both focused on congregate work, and the funds earned by inmate labor were welcome. Industrial programs and natural extension of prison maintenance work assignments offered a structured means of establishing a strong work ethic and vocational training while offsetting some institutional costs. Several different prison industrial systems developed during this period were contract, lease, state use systems, public works, and ways system. Progressive era, this period is characterized by a reform movement that attempted to address a variety of social problems, including the role of prisons. Programs that were implemented during this era were the following: classification, normalization, education, and vocational training. Reformative movement focused on education and training. The reformatory aimed at young adults and designed as an industrial training school allowed reformers and policymakers to use the new institutional model as a symbol of reform as a practice to solution to overcrowding. Rehabilitation is defined as treatment or treatments designed to facilitate the process of recovery from injury, illness, or disease as a normal condition as possible. So where is our correctional system today? Well, the United States is the world's leader in incarceration with 2.2 million people currently in the nation's prisons or jails. That's a 500% increase over the past 30 years. These trends have resulted in prison overcrowding, state governments being overwhelmed by the burden of funding, rapidly expanding penal system, despite decreasing evidence that large-scale incarceration is the most effective means of achieving public safety. In the coming weeks, you will enhance your knowledge of the correctional system. The university is here to offer support as you continue through your educational journey. As always, ask questions if you need assistance, and most importantly, let's have some fun.